Welcome to the Fear and Greed Daily Interview. I'm Sean Aylmer. Recently, we saw the federal government launch its national cultural policy, $300 million in funding across music, literature, art and more. It was welcomed by peak bodies across the sector who know how to make that funding go a long, long way. Now, one leader within the sector is issuing a challenge to corporate Australia. Look to the arts if you want to evolve, stay relevant and become sustainable. Paul Duldig is the Chief Executive of State Library Victoria, Australia's oldest and most prestigious public library. Paul, welcome to Fear and Greed.
G'day, Sean.
Let's jump straight into it. What can Australian businesses learn from cultural institutions?
Well, look, I think a few things, Sean. Firstly, the cultural institutions have been around for a long time, and we know through the innovation cycle that businesses that are at the beginning of any innovation cycle, half of them don't tend to be there 30 years later and another half 30 years after that. But institutions like ours have been around for 167 years. So there's something we're doing right, both in the eyes of the communities that we serve, but also the assets and the collections that we hold. So the kind of things we do that I think are worthwhile thinking about is making sure that we've got a lot of really diverse voices and views in the room when we make decisions so that we're adaptable and keeping pace with the community standards and the way that communities change, but also really looking to creative people, looking to the creativity in our staff and in our leadership to make sure that we can continue to adapt. I mean, the State Library is almost nothing like it was 167 years ago, but it's still a library and it's still doing that core service.
I don't think State Library Victoria is anything like it was 10 years ago, to be honest, Paul.
Probably true.
Yeah, I mean, but the cultural institutions have been able to adapt incredibly well. Part of that is passion, isn't it?
Absolutely. A passion and a real focus on the core purpose. So we are what would be called for-purpose organisations, and so absolutely we're clear about our mission and we're clear why we exist, and that's the white heat core of what we do and the kind of approach we take.
So is it, I mean, how important then is it a business to have that mission, to have that core purpose? And I mean, you can talk about a bank, right? But a bank can have a core purpose of serving people to ensure that they can facilitate their life. I mean, it is as fundamental as that. It must be important then for businesses to find that in what they do.
I believe that's right. And I think the successful businesses do that really well, and it comes through not just in the services they provide, but the way they interact with you and the way they talk about themselves and the impact they have on your lives. I mean, there's lots of fantastic businesses out there that are really clear about that.
How does an organisation like State Library Victoria or other cultural institutions differ from businesses, or are they just run like businesses?
I would say a lot of what we do is run like a business. I mean, we've got some very experienced people here that have had successful careers in business, and the same with when I was in the university sector. A lot of our leaders had careers that combined both a corporate background as well as a university background. So I think there is a lot of good that comes from those perspectives around the table and the clarity of decision making and so on. But I think also for creative leadership and for creative people, I think one of the things that perhaps people don't realise is that creative people are extremely practical, actually. They just don't survive if they're not. And so this idea that creativity is on one end of a spectrum and practicality is on the other is just a complete nonsense. I mean, the artists that I know, the musicians that I know, even in my own arts practice, I know that you have to make really good decisions. You have to be incredibly well practiced. You have to be super focused on what you're doing and very aware of the marketplace that you're in. And it's almost the ultimate free enterprise, actually.
It reminds me, years ago, Tim Winton, the author, won an award and he got $20,000, or I can't quite remember the number, but I think it was $20,000. And he was interviewed and saying, what are you going to do on that with that? And I'm expecting something, incredible. And he said, I'll probably put it on the mortgage. I thought, yeah, it is. I mean, one of the creative geniuses that Australia has produced kind of has to live in everyday life.
Absolutely. And the creatives out there are, doing it tough during COVID and during the lockdowns, and the way that the creatives, pivoted has been extraordinary, really, to survive and continue doing their work.
Stay with me, Paul. We'll be back in a minute. My guest this morning is State Library Victoria Chief Executive, Paul Duldig. So how often do you see true creativity in the business world?
That's a great question, Sean. I think one of the things that's worth thinking about is that within the most innovation active industries, about a quarter of those people that work in those industries hold creative qualifications. So they actually have creative people inside. So people with design backgrounds, fashion, literature, digital media, film, working in libraries and museums. And so those people are making a significant contribution to the innovation in those enterprises on a daily basis.
Is it easier to be creative? I mean, I think you've just answered the question for me, but is it easier to be creative in a publicly funded institution, such as State Library Victoria, than it is in a shareholder funded institution where every half year they've got to come up and report and have a share price, etc.?
Yes and no. So I would say yes, it's probably more rewarded in a public sector institution, particularly a cultural institution. But also no, because the fundamental goal of a corporation is to create shareholder value, and the word "create" is there in the core purpose. So you've got to be someone, particularly in a leadership role, you've got to be someone who is creating capability, creating understanding of the market that you're in, creating understanding of the industry, and innovating. So again, these are really practical tools that creative people do on a daily basis.
You talk about leadership. It must be challenging to lead a cultural institution when you have so many interested parties. So State Library Victoria, I'm sure the general public obviously, but you have government, you have peak bodies and interest groups, you have education organisations, you have technology groups. How do you manage keeping everyone happy, or you don't try?
Yeah, so we've done stakeholder mapping here at State Library Victoria, and you're right, the map is pretty complex. I mean, there's a lot of people who have a love of the library, a lot of people who have an interest and really want it to be the kind of library where they want to be. The beauty of our organisation is the diversity of the people that come through the door. We have about 2 million people a year, and just over half of those identify as culturally and linguistically diverse. 75% of those are below the age of 35. So it's a pretty diverse range of people that even just coming through the door, let alone thinking of themselves as stakeholders, I guess you'd say. So look, you can't keep everyone happy. You have to be true to your core. You have to be true to your purpose, and you have to work with, if you're going to disappoint somebody, which I hope we don't do too often, that they understand that it's for a greater good, that they understand that there's a reason and a real deep logic and thinking behind what you're doing. And in my experience, they accept that.
I'm surprised that there's such a large percentage of visitors to State Library Victoria who are young.
Well, I think that's one of the images that people have from the outside, is that it's a place where people are shushed all the time, and look, you only have to stand in the front door of the Swanston Street entrance here in the State Library at 10 o'clock and just see. It's like Boxing Day sales. People are rushing through the door trying to get their study cubicle, or go to the exhibitions or whatever. And it's got a good vibe. It's a young place. Absolutely, it's a young creative place, and it's not just a physical experience. It's obviously online as well. So we have around 5 million hits a year on our websites. And when people come here, they're actually staying on average 2.5 hours, like literally 2.5 hours average across 2 million people, which is pretty amazing. Yeah.
That is pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Now, I've got to get onto the National Cultural Policy, which the government announced a few weeks back. Is it a good investment? Does it hit the right marks? Has it missed anything?
Look, I think it's a really good start. And they're clear it is a start. It's a start of a journey over many years of putting back in place the kinds of platforms that we need to be successful. And I'm really, really pleased that books and writing are in the thick of it. So there's significant announcements around the role that literature plays and literacy. I mean, having two Melbourne writers, by the way, on the advisory group is pretty impressive, including Claire Wright, who herself talked about her love for State Libraries. So I think, putting back music and literature into that conversation, I think are the two areas that we're absolutely delighted with. There's more to be done. There's some more consideration of how the institutions are funded, of course, but I think also putting creatives at the heart is a key policy in there that is also strongly supported, as well as an obvious focus on First Nations first. So no, we're really happy with it as a national framework, and also here in Victoria have a very supportive state government with very similar thinking as well.
What about business? Does business do enough to promote, I'm not even saying support, I say promote deliberately, cultural institutions, the arts, creativity?
I think they could do more. I think there's opportunities for particularly staff in a lot of businesses to engage more with cultural institutions and culture more generally. And we have a corporate sponsorship program. We have some of the big corporates as members of ours, and they do send their staff along to a lot of our talks and a lot of our events. But I think there's more. I mean, the cultural industries are worth over $100 billion to the economy, to the GDP, and the creative economy employs more people than mining and agriculture put together. So this is in and of itself an industry as well, which I think is worth pointing out.
Paul, thank you for talking to Fear and Greed.
Thank you so much.
That was Paul Duldig, Chief Executive of State Library Victoria. This is the Fear and Greed Daily Interview. Join us every morning for the full episode of Fear and Greed, Australia's most popular business podcast. I'm Sean Aylmer. Enjoy your day.